اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل الفجر. السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and His pure, immaculate Ahlul Bayt. I too have thoroughly enjoyed the last few nights with a very warm audience, alhamdulillah. Thank you for being very patient with these discussions. I'm happy that there wasn't a Q&A session today. These things don't get solved with Q&As. One has to be patient and read and listen. It takes time. It has to be absorbed slowly. And maybe, yes, I want to thank the committee here for inviting me here, and especially Muhammad Ali Tabai, who put a lot of effort in the transport and the tickets. I want to thank him for his time and efforts. And also I want to thank Muhammad Al-Zubaydi, who I was a guest in his house for the last 5 nights, for his hospitality. Okay, tonight inshallah, being the last night, it's going to be quite a long discussion tonight, with your permission. 1.5 to 2 hours maybe. But feel free to leave whenever you want, but do it slowly so it doesn't affect me. Yes. But the last person who leaves, don't switch off the lights. Yes. Yes. I want to discuss the Miraj of the Holy Messenger. This is a topic which maybe we've been given only one perspective into what the Miraj was. And I want to share with you what the Urafa, especially people like Imam Khomeini, Allama Tabatabai, Ayatollah Hassanzadeh Amuli, Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, these people are all saying the same thing in relation to the Miraj. But it's different to how we've understood it, maybe. Now there are many traditions in relation to the Miraj, the Ascension of the Holy Prophet. And in these traditions we see that there are a lot of details in them. A lot of particularities have been mentioned in relation to the Ascension of the Holy Prophet. Amin al-Islam Tabarsi, in his tafsir of the Quran, he has classified these traditions into 4 different groups. So I'll mention what he says about these groups, and I'll mention his classification, and then we'll go to Al-Mizan and see what Allama Tabatabai says, and we'll take things from there. He says there are some mutawatir traditions in relation to the Miraj. There are so many of these traditions that we have yaqeen in relation to the authenticity and the content of these traditions, because there are so many different sources of these for these traditions. And then he gives, for example, the Ascension itself. The fact that the Ascension has happened, we can allude to and refer to these mutawatir traditions. And so no one can deny that an Ascension happened. The Miraj did happen. That much is indisputable. But the second class, he says there are some traditions which are not mutawatir. But they don't go against rationality, and they don't go against Quranic principles. But we don't have many of these traditions that... Yes. Right. I explained it. Yes. When I was saying it, I explained that when there are so many of these traditions that it leads to one's certitude, one's certainty, because of the extent of these traditions. There are so many of them that we say, so it must be. But the second group, there are some traditions which aren't mutawatir, i.e. we don't have so many of these traditions that lead us to say it must be true. However, in these traditions, although they're not mutawatir, they don't go against rationality and they don't go against Quranic principles. So there's no need to deny them. You can't say it's impossible for these to happen. And actually, with the help of the Quran and with the help of rationality, one says they are likely. There's no impediment for these to happen. Just because they're not mutawatir, it doesn't mean we can just discard them. The criterion the fuqaha use in ilm al-hadith is as long as it's not against the traditions in relation to one's aqaid, not in fiqh. If it's not against rationality and it's not against the Holy Quran, i.e. it's on a par with rationality, it's on a par with, it's in accordance with Quranic principles, even though they're not mutawatir, we can still accept them. Even though we don't have a lot of these traditions, but we can still accept them. And then Tabarsi gives examples. He says like the tawaf going, the circumambulation or what is it? I can't, the English is a bit, right. Circumambulation, or, yes. What was it, sorry? Circumambulation, yes. That's tawaf in Arabic. This tawaf in the heavens, for example, seeing the prophets, because all the prophets prayed behind the Holy Prophet, the previous prophets, going to heaven, going to hell, all these things, he says it's not against. Tabarsi is saying this. He's giving some masadiq now, some examples of this second group. This second group that we don't have so many of these traditions. But since it doesn't go against the Quran or rationality, he says we can accept them. We don't need to deny them. Such as the Holy Prophet seeing all the prophets, or his going around in tawaf in the heavens. This is acceptable. It doesn't go against the Quran, he says, or rationality. In the third class, he says we have some traditions that do go against indisputable principles of the Quran and of rationality. However, we can interpret them on a manner by discarding the superficial meaning and interpreting it esoterically. We don't accept the prima facie meaning of those traditions because it goes against rationality, it goes against the Quran. But we can still do ta'wil, and that's when we interpret, we discard the superficial meaning and we interpret it in another way. And we have that in the Quran, like Yadullah, the hand of Allah. We don't take it as at the superficial level. We discard the prima facie meaning and we go and interpret it in another way. He says there are some traditions in the Miraj we can't accept. It goes against principles, but it doesn't matter. We can interpret it in another way. In his examples of this class of traditions, such as the punishing of the inmates of hell, or the provisions of blessings to the inmates of heaven. In some traditions of Miraj, people are being punished in hell right now. Some people are being blessed in heaven right now. He says this can't be because heaven and hell hasn't occurred right now. He says we can't accept the prima facie meaning of these traditions because these people are still here. They're not dead. They're not in hell yet. They're not in heaven yet. This is what Tabarsi is saying. And finally, there are some traditions which he says that the prima facie meaning, the superficial meaning, is discarded and there's no interpretation that is possible. No ta'wil is even possible now. We can't go around it or explain it in another way. And the examples he gives are those traditions which speak of the Holy Prophet's body being dissected and washed during the Miraj. Okay, now that was a classification in Majma'ul Bayan given by Tabarsi. It's a very authoritative book in the world of tafsir, and before Allama Tabatawi's Al-Mizan came, that was the ruling authority. And I think the story goes like this, that he was unconscious for a while and people thought he was dead. So they buried him in the cemetery, but he wasn't dead. And then after being buried, he became conscious. And he made a vow to Allah that were he to come out of this cemetery somehow, he'll write a very good tafsir that history has not seen. Now what happens is a thief, because Tabarsi was one of the scholars, and the kafan of the scholars are sometimes expensive. So the thief waited for the cemetery to be night for him to go and at least steal the kafan, so he can then sell it for some money. So he opens up the grave and Tabarsi is awake there, and he forgave the thief and everything. But Tabarsi then went on to write this tafsir. This is how he's narrated it. Okay, so he's given this classification of traditions in relation to the Mi'raj. Allama Tabatawi, for whoever's interested to see what his final say in relation to the Mi'raj is, you have to look at the final 2 paragraphs in Al-Mizan under the verse chapter 17, verse number 1. The final 2 paragraphs, he says everything. Now with your permission, I want to read through it now. وَمَا ذَكَرَهُ مِنَ التَّقْسِيمِ فِي مَحَلِّهِ. This is, he's speaking in relation to Tabarsi's classification. He says that which we've said, because he mentions the classification too. That which we've mentioned from Tabarsi and his classification is sound. في محله غير أن غالب ما أورده من الأمثلة للأقسام منظور فيه. However, the examples that Tabarsi gives, the Masadiq, the examples he gives for each of the groups, it's questionable. We accept the classification Tabarsi gives, but when Tabarsi wants to give some examples, those examples are problematic. We can't accept it. But the general guidelines we accept. فَمَا ذَكَرَهُ مِنَ التَّوَافِ وَرُؤْيَةِ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ. That which he mentions of tawaf in the heavens and seeing the prophets, which Tabarsi said are physical events, Allama says these are tamathulatun barzakhiyatun aw ruhiyya. These are apparitions, these are visions, barzakhi visions, spiritual visions, those semi-immaterial visions, similar to what we see in our dreams. But the Holy Prophet, it was no dream, the Miraj. He was awake. I'm just giving an analogy to understand what visions are. Visions have no physical matter in them. Allama says, in that class where it speaks of doing tawaf in the heavens, where the Prophet sees all the prophets praying behind him, these are not physical events. These are visions. It didn't happen in the physical realm. These are barzakhi visions, a product of the soul of the Holy Messenger. وكذا ما ذكره من حديث شق البطن والغسل تمثل برزخي لا ضير فيه. Also, that which was mentioned, the dissection of the body of the Holy Prophet and the washing of the inside of the body of the Holy Prophet, that is also a vision, an apparition, a barzakhi vision, and there's no harm in it. وأحاديث الإسراء مملوءة من ذكر هذا النوع من التمثل. And the traditions of the Isra, of the Miraj, are filled with such apparitions. You see, it's very explicit here. All these traditions in relation to the Miraj, they're filled with tamathulatun barzakhiyya. Now, just in case one or two of you may still be a bit confused, what are these visions? What are barzakhi visions? Very quickly, if I just go through it. Remember the verse, Lady Maryam alayhi salam, فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهَا بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا, in chapter 19. Archangel Gabriel appeared before Lady Maryam. It was a barzakhi angel, semi-immaterial angel Lady Maryam saw, not with the physical eye. Ayatollah Hassan Zara said, if we were sitting next to her, we wouldn't have seen that. But Lady Maryam was awake. Whilst awake, she ascended, whilst awake, to immaterial realms, received divine knowledge from Allah, and then converted that knowledge to pictures. The pictures were Archangel Gabriel coming and giving a message. But it was a product of the soul. It wasn't anything happening outside the soul. Those pictures are tamathulat, or visions or apparitions. So the traditions on the Miraj are filled with these kinds of tamathulat, كتمثل الدنيا في هيئة مرأة عليها من كل زينة الدنيا. Such as, for example, the traditions where a woman is seen with wearing all forms of adornments, that being the embodiment of the worldly life. The embodiment of the worldly life appeared before the Holy Messenger in the shape of a tamathul, a vision, where there's a woman with all the adornments and embellishments. But it's indicative of that embodiment of the dunya. وتمثل دعوة اليهودية والنصرانية, and the tamathul of the call that the Jew gave to the Holy Prophet, the call that the Christian gave. Because during the Mi'raj, he heard the sound of a Jew calling upon him. He heard the sound of, these sounds were also apparitions. He heard the sound of a Christian calling upon him. Now these are all forms of tamathulat, which are indicating how the call to batil, to falsehood, can arise, and how we have to avoid such calls in this world. But the message came in this form: a Jew calling upon him, a Christian calling upon him. Not that it happened in the physical realm. If Aisha was there in the room, she wouldn't have heard anyone calling upon the Holy Prophet. There were no physical sounds. It's like when we hear the sounds in our dreams, our partner's not listening or can't hear anything. وَمَا شَاهَدَهُ مِنْ أَنْوَاءِ النَّعِيمِ وَالْعَذَابِ لِأَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ وَالنَّارِ وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ. Other examples of tamathulat is when during the Mi'raj he sees people burning in hell. He sees people being blessed in heaven. These are also all tamathulat of the Holy Messenger. Then Allah continues, ومما يؤيد هذا الذي ذكرناه ما في ألسنة هذا الأخبار. Now, buttressing, supporting that which we have said is that which is the tone, ألسنة الأخبار, that which is the tone of the traditions. What is that tone of the traditions? من الاختلاف, namely, it's the differences. Differences in what? من الاختلاف في بيان حقيقة واحدة كما في بعضها في صعوده إلى السماء. That when it wants to describe one reality, such as the ascending to the heavens of the Holy Prophet, it does so in different ways. There are a different number of ways that we see described in the traditions, okay? Different number of traditions describing the su'ud, the ascension to the heavens, but in different ways. For example, Bil Buraq, sometimes it's describing the ascension to the heavens with Buraq, the horse, for example, where the Holy Prophet ascended with a horse. Wafi akhara, and in other traditions, that su'ud, that ascension to the heavens, is described as ala jinah Jabrail. The Holy Prophet ascended on the wings of Archangel Gabriel. وفي آخر, in other traditions, بمعراج منصوب على صخرة بيت المقدس إلى السماء, speaks of a ladder from the dome of the rock in Palestine to the heavens. There's a ladder going to the heavens. See, different ways we see mentioned in the traditions describing one reality, and that is the ascension. But it's described in a number of different ways. إلى غير ذلك مما يأثر عليه الباحث المتدبر في خلال هذه الروايات. And other ways too that the diligent researcher will observe in going through the traditions. فهذه, and all these, وأمثالها, and it's like all these traditions, and similar to these traditions, ترشد, guides one to what? إلى أن هذه البيانات موضوعة. All these traditions are assigned على التمثيل أو التمثل. They're all assigned as metaphors or visions and apparitions. Now, some people want to translate tamthil as visions and apparitions too, but no, that seems unlikely. He's mentioning tamthil or tamathul. Tamthil are the metaphors. Tamathul are the visions, those barzakhi visions. The point is, all these traditions have to be assigned with this meaning. They're either metaphors or they're tamathulat, they're apparitions. ووقوع هذه التمثيلات في ظواهر الكتاب والسنة, and the existence of these metaphors in the Holy Quran and in the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt مما لا سبيل إلى إنكاره البتة. There's no way of denying them. These exist. These analogies, these metaphors exist, referring to the fact that the reality, the haqiqah, was ascending to this heavens. But it was used in a figurative language, such as he went with a horse, not that there was a horse. He went with a ladder, not that there was a physical ladder going to the heavens. Or on the wing of Jibreel, not that there was a physical wing that he went up. These are just metaphors, he's saying. Or they are visions and apparitions. Okay. Now, Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, he has many books on tafsir, and they're usually compiled by a team based on his lectures and everything. But the lectures he gives in tafsir also can be found on his internet site, and they are his own words. And there's much more luminosity when you read his own words than you read what his team has compiled from his lectures. But on the internet site, in his own words, under chapter 17 verse 1, he says that, because the verse in chapter 17 verse 1, سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا. I think it ends وإنه هو السميع البصير or something. Immaculate is He, is Allah, who carried His servant at night from Masjid al-Haram in Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa, which is, there was no mosque at that time. The mosque was to be one day in the future. Some people use this as one of the miracles of the Quran. To Masjid al-Aqsa, which means literally the furthest mosque. The furthest mosque, that area which Allah blessed its surroundings, but He carried His servant لِنُرِيَهُ, to show him of amongst the divine signs. He says, min al-Masjid al-Haram, from Masjid al-Haram, from Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa, that can be regarded as, well, he says the Arabic for that journey is called Isra, that being carried away. And that can happen in the physical realm, because Mecca is physical, Masjid al-Aqsa was physical, and there's no impediment to say that that journey was a physical journey. His body too went at a very quick speed. But Miraj is that the vertical, not vertical in space, but vertical in rank, is a vertical journey to the heavens. That, he says, there's no need to say that was physical, because the heavens aren't a physical realm. The physical realm is this world. This world has no end. You keep on going high, there's always matter there. There's no end to that. But he says that the Miraj, the journey to the heavens, that's called the Miraj, and we don't need to bring the physical dimension to that. But traveling from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa, yes, there's no impediment to say that was a physical journey. Let's go slowly by slowly. I'll add different perspectives to this as we go on. Then he compares the verse of the Quran which reads, وَلَمَّا جَاءَ مُوسَى لِمِيقَاتِنَا, and when Musa came to our meeting place. Allah is saying this. When Musa came to the meeting place. Here Musa came. In the Miraj though, the Holy Prophet was taken. There's a difference between going and being taken. Although there's no time to go into that difference, but it's the difference between Qurb Nawafil and Qurb Fara'id. These are two stations in Irfan. But I don't want to go into this debate now. That takes a lecture in itself. Just to appreciate there's a difference between a prophet going and a prophet being taken. When you're being taken, it's of a higher rank spiritually. Now, Tabarsi in the second group, he says, in his second class, he said, there are some traditions which they don't go against aql, they don't go against principles of the Quran, and therefore we don't have to deny it. Like doing tawaf in the skies, for example, or seeing the prophets. Here, Allama Tabatabai and Ayatollah Jawadi, quoting Allama Tabatabai in his tafsir, says that seeing the Dome of the Rock, Baytul Maqdis, with the physical eye it's okay. Seeing